What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
Hello, welcome to the Lead Counsel podcast. I'm your host, Tom Tona. I'm here with Juliet, my good friend. She's the marketing person at TonaLaw, and she's going to be my sometimes co-host on the podcast. Welcome, Jules.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Lead Counsel podcast.
Yeah, I just want to start out and say thank you to everybody that's listening. We're excited. This is an intro episode, and we're going to give you a little bit of our backstory, who we are, what we do, why we are starting this podcast. Jules, take it away.
All right, Tom, do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Sure. So I grew up in North Babylon. I went to college and law school at Hofstra University, and I became a lawyer in 1994. I know it's a long time ago, Jules. I know you want to laugh. So I came out of law school and I went to work in personal injury relatively quickly at the recommendation of a friend of mine who will be on the podcast at some point. He's a personal injury attorney as well. His name is Herb Auger. I am the founder of TonaLaw. And TonaLaw is a multi-silo law firm where we handle personal injury cases where people have been injured due to the negligence of others. And we have another silo where we handle no-fault collections for hundreds and hundreds of medical providers, institutional, from standalone medical providers all the way through publicly held companies that are providing medical services for people that are injured in car accidents and their medical insurance claims are being wrongly denied. And then we have another silo of litigation that we do, which is breach of contract. And the majority of that is construction-related breach of contract.
Nice. Can you tell us why you decided to become a lawyer?
Sure. So initially, my parents, from a very young age, instilled in me that was the route to success, right? Their definition of success was you became a doctor, a lawyer. Again, I was born in 1968. I was growing up through the 1970s, and they had that old school mentality where you went to college, you went to some type of professional school, and you got some type of professional degree. So, lawyer, doctor, dentist. I didn't like the sight of blood as a kid, even though it doesn't bother me now because of the cases that I've worked on. And so I chose law school. It was not necessarily the right reason to go to law school, but I was lucky that I was able to find what I was passionate about, what I was truly passionate about throughout steps in my career. And, that's what brought me to today. So the story about how I found my passion within the law goes back to when I was very young. I was bullied. I was severely bullied. And, I was always a smaller kid. I'm 5'7". I weigh 150 pounds. I think it was 125 pounds when I graduated high school. So I got into martial arts very young, probably around 15. And the bullying continued, but I continued on in the martial arts. And I realized how much I loved actually fighting once I had the skills, right? So then I go to law school, and I thought I wanted to go into real estate as a career path within the law. And I was doing transactional stuff, and I hated it because I hated being the guy that worked for the rich guy. I wanted to be the guy buying the real estate and doing development deals. I didn't want to work for the rich guy and make, anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 a closing. That was making me crazy. So right around the same time, I met somebody who's about 5 years ahead of me career-wise. His name is Herb Auger. He's a good friend of mine. He was sharing space in the office that I was doing the transactional work in, and Herb and I were going out to lunch a lot. And, he said to me one day, listen, your personality is such that you'd be great in personal injury. And he was doing personal injury for 5 years at that time. He was also from North Babylon, very scrappy. Like North Babylon is known for its scrappiness, right? Like you know, your parents from North Babylon, it's a blue collar town and you really have to fight for everything that you get and achieve, literally physically fight, right? So, Herb telling me that literally 6 months later, I get a job offer at a personal injury firm out in Suffolk County to become a personal injury trial associate. And I thought that meant I was going to work for a bunch of years under a trial attorney and I would get second chair experience, but he would do all of this training and I would learn how to become a trial attorney through all this theory. And instead I got to the firm and a week later, I get a file plopped down on my desk. And I said, what's this? And he says, oh, you're on trial next week. And I was. And I had to pick my first jury. And it was terrifying. It was the most fun I ever had at the same time. And I was hooked after the verdict came back. I actually won the trial. I took a small verdict because it was a case I wasn't even supposed to win. It was a low probability of success case. And I was really hooked after that. And that's where I was able to tie my passion, which was sticking up for people that couldn't stick up for themselves, fighting for people that were being bullied by these big insurance companies and these corporations that were hurting people for profit. So through that, I spent the next 10 years of my career, let's say, doing all forms of litigation. Any cases I could litigate other than matrimonial, I was litigating. And I would take them to trial if they had to go to trial. And I loved it. I loved it. It's an intense amount of work that you do to prepare for trial. All of the work that goes into winning a case is done before you get to the courtroom. It starts pretty much day one that you sign the case up. It has to do a lot with case selection and that type of stuff. So fast forward at some point, roughly around 10 years ago, I had to make another decision career-wise. And that was, do I want to be an entrepreneur that owns a law firm business that provides legal services to people at scale? Or do I stay smaller as the practitioner? And then you can only service about 100 to tops 150 clients with you and a support staff if you're the attorney that's also doing all the work, right? So my real passion was entrepreneurship, which, I was always entrepreneurial from the time I was a kid. I remember a time in grade school that my mother got a bag of pins that you're going to laugh, right? So my mother got a bag of pins from a friend of hers at the bowling alley, and there were like 50 pins in there. And those 50 pins, they all said the same thing. I'm hot, right? And this was back in the 70s, which is way before your time. This was back in the 70s where you can ask your mother, there were belts that used to say, I'm too sexy or stuff like that. They were stretch belts and stuff. So like it was big back then. If you watch Forrest Gump, you saw all of the different things that occurred in the 70s. Did you watch Forrest Gump?
Oh
my God. You didn't watch it. You didn't watch it.
Honestly, have not seen Forrest Gump. I know a lot of people are probably going to be like, what the heck? But yeah, no, I've never watched it. So you lost me on that one.
All right. So the 70s were a time when like the smiley face button came out, right? And everybody had a smiley face button. So it was like a big deal. So my mother gets this bag of pins that says, I'm hot. They were red and the writing was white. And I know it really well because I took the bag of like 50 pins that she got free from a friend of hers. It was just a throwaway thing. He must have gotten like a dispenser machine or something. And I went to school the next day and I sold them for $1 a piece. And I sold out $50 worth of pins by the time school ended that day. So then I went back and I was like, you got any more pins? Can you get me any more of those pins? And sure enough, she did. And I kept selling those pins. I sold everything and I learned sales from a very young age. So entrepreneurship was like in my blood, right? I always had a high risk tolerance, and probably the highest risk field you can imagine within the law is personal injury, right? So I decided to make the switch over from a practitioner to a pure entrepreneur after reading The E-Myth and E-Myth for Attorneys by Michael Gerber. And at that time, my business was growing pretty rapidly. I was just doing pure personal injury, but I had sat down and come up with a business plan that said, well, how do I expand And then I added no-fault collections because I had always done no-fault collections for friends of mine. No-fault collections is a really niche practice in an area that 99% of law firms don't want to touch, right? They just don't want to do it. So I was very adept at it. So I added that as a second silo. And then as I started to scale from there, the firm grew rapidly. And that's what brings us to today. Now I'm skipping a lot, right? Because there was a massive growth story there. We went from one lawyer, me with a laptop, to me with a paralegal. And then fast forward, we just hired our 32nd or 33rd team member. And with that, we had very explosive financial growth. And there was a point of overwhelm. God, it's got to be like right around the same time, probably 8 years ago. So 2 years into the entrepreneurial journey where I was overwhelmed by explosive growth because no one teaches you in law school how to grow a business, how to run a business, how to maintain. I was very fortunate. I had another good friend along the journey. He was part of a coaching group, right? And this coaching group was instrumental in his growth as an entrepreneurial lawyer. And so I came back after having lunch with him one day and I signed up for one of their seminars literally. And I think it was being held like 30 days later. And then I signed up for their year program. And then I was with them for about 10 years. And I still coach regularly one-on-one with one of their coaches and several other coaches that we've picked up along the way. And the entrepreneurial journey has been super scary, super fun, and super messy. But I would do it all again the same way because that's what an entrepreneur does. And I realized that you can't really be both. You can't be a great practitioner and a great entrepreneur. You have to give one of them up. There are people that love doing trial work, which I really enjoyed. I did enjoy it. It was the most fun you'll have as a litigator is doing the trials. And I had done about 20 cases or so to verdict, right around there. But I made the decision to go entrepreneur because I just loved the challenge of building something scalable. And instead of capping how many people I could provide excellent lawyering services to at 100 to 150, I built a business that can service thousands of clients, thousands, tens of thousands of files a year we service in our multiple silos, right? So that's what brings us to this point. That's who I am. That's what I do. I run the business of a law firm that provides very high quality legal services at scale.
And how did you decide to start your own law firm?
I had what was called an entrepreneurial seizure, right? So there's a time when you have the switch flip where you go, oh, wait, I can do this better than who I'm working for, or I can do this way more profitably, or I'm making them so much money, I can just make this for myself. That's an entrepreneurial seizure, right? So what for me happened was I was working under one of my dearest mentors, a guy named Don Sullivan. Don was a very experienced trial attorney, and he ran the personal injury silo at this other law firm I was working at. Don and I were out to lunch one day, and he said, listen, I got to have a conversation with you. I am 2 years away. I just got tapped for a political position, and I'm 2 years away from my pension vesting if I go and take this position for 2 years. So I'm taking it. I am exiting the law firm. He was a partner. He was an equity partner, and he was being bought out. And he said to me, you need to leave because you have, 30 to 40 personal injury files that you've brought in. And quite honestly, you're making more money than some of the partners, and you should take those files with you. And we worked out a deal. And the next day, because I got laid off, right? It was a layoff without it feeling like it was a layoff. It was the biggest opportunity, though. I went home. I woke up the next day and said, I'm opening my own firm. And I did. I set up a corporation. I purchased a few pieces of technology that I needed. And I had these 35 files that I just started processing right away. I was lucky because it wasn't a war with them over the files. We worked it out. They were very kind to me. They said, look, you take them, you cut us back a piece for all the work that you did while you were here on them, and you pay us back the disbursements when you get paid back at the end. And I thought that they were gentlemen about it. We're still good friends to this day. And I've made them a lot of money over the years because we maintain that relationship as well. So now that I'm running my own thing, we do a lot of stuff as peers versus the way we used to work, and then I'm going back 22 years ago. I opened the firm in 2001.
Yes, I know. We're going on to, what is that, year 22?
Yeah, actually, in April 1st.
Wow. So not only did Don push you into trial work, but he pushed you to open your own firm as well. And look at where it's gone now.
Yeah. Think of Don very fondly. He was a fantastic mentor. It's one of the things that at this point in my career, I hope to give back to the younger generation of attorneys, because it literally changed the trajectory of my life having him as a mentor. I learned how to try cases. And once you know how to try cases, you are in the top, let's say, 5% of lawyers across the country that are practicing law, because only 5% of attorneys, I think, or less, have actually tried a case, like actually gone in front of a jury, put on evidence, and tried a case. So what happened was that really gave me a set, defined skill set that was super transferable, super valuable. And I knew how to feed myself after that. I knew I'd always be good.
So what made you decide to start a podcast?
A few things, right? The law is one of the few professions where a piece of paper, a law degree, and a bar certification, another piece of paper, separate what you can do from what the rest of the general public can do. And then within the law, different veins of practice really are separate and distinct from other veins. So like if you have an attorney that is a transactional lawyer, they should never sign up a litigation case. And I know ones that do and they shouldn't. But so I wanted to start the podcast for the general public in discussing and hopefully having them focus on how they're thinking about any legal issues that might be coming up in their life, right? And thinking about how they're thinking about it, right? And then I also wanted to start the podcast for entrepreneurial lawyers or lawyers that are on the entrepreneurial journey with their own law firms to give them the benefit of all of the things that I've done and all the lessons that I learned, and maybe make their journey less painful, less expensive, easier, So I wanted to provide value to the general public in analyzing their legal issues. Do they even need attorneys? And how do attorneys think about the issues that they're facing? I wanted to provide value to practicing attorneys that are thinking about the entrepreneurial journey or on the entrepreneurial journey and 5 to 20 years behind where I am right now. And then the third reason I wanted to start the podcast is I have this really awesome circle of close friends and advisors that are at the top of their field. And they're also at the top of the food chain at what they do. And they're all hyper successful. And those conversations that I have every day on my cell phone, or on Zoom or on whatever, video calling we're doing, so much comes out of those conversations that are valuable that I thought if I could get those same people on here, we could provide tremendous value to both the general public and to attorneys if we made those conversations publicly available, right? Like, how does an 8-figure lawyer become an 8-figure lawyer? What was it like on the journey to breaking your first 7 figures in revenue? What's a 9-figure attorney look like at 35 years old? Yeah, they're out there, right? And also, just for the general public too, like, Jules, you and I have conversations all the time, right? Like, you're really hungry. Mm-hmm. You're really, hungry for success, and you're hungry to be an achiever in life. To give you exposure to those conversations and those people, would you have that opportunity elsewhere? Would you have that? So I really want to provide value in every episode, mm-hmm. right? And have these kinds of guests on where I've sat you down at dinner tables with people that are 7 and 8-figure attorneys right now, yep. right? And they're marketing people because you're in love with marketing and you love marketing and you're sharing ideas, right? And now you got people calling you because they want to hear from you. Hey, I see what you're doing on social media. Can you give me some pointers? Can you give me some tips and some tricks? Right. Mm-hmm. So I just thought that there is tremendous value in my inner circle, and I'd love to expose people to that. So those 3 reasons really are, the reason I wanted to get it off the ground. There's another reason as well. So many people don't know what goes on in the law. Mm-hmm. Right. To the general public, like if I say to you, Jules, you're being sued, you're not. But if I said to you, Jules, you're being sued, do you know what to do? The blood's going to drain from your face. Right. But I can mm-hmm. explain to you what that means. I can explain to you what will go on, and I will explain to you why you should not be panicking. I wanted to remove any mystery behind what goes on in the law field and in the courtroom. right, in litigation.
Yeah, I feel like when people think of the law field, they find it a lot more daunting than it really is. So I think that's a good idea to start this podcast, to give people a look inside the law field and realize that it's not as scary as it can seem to be.
Well, it can be very scary, but if you know how to approach it, it's like anything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you represent yourself in cases? Sure. Should you? Probably not, right? But it's really a matter of how do you approach problem solving? How do you analyze issues? And what do you need to know about your options that are in front of you? All right. I want to thank everybody for tuning into the Lead Counsel podcast. I'm your host, Tom Tona. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple, Google, any of those places. And if you are listening, please leave us feedback, like, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review. That would be really appreciated. You can contact us on all the major social media platforms. Just Google TonaLaw, TonaLaw, and you can't not find us online. The next episode, hopefully you'll tune in. We're going to expand a little bit more on the topics of the podcast and the types of guests that we're going to have. And again, thank you for tuning in. And Jules, it's been real. We're out.
Yep. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.